to the Bet On Me podcast, the ultimate resource for softball players looking to take control of their training and reach their full potential. I'm your host, Krista Stoker, and on this show, we'll be discussing everything from taking a holistic approach to your training to data-driven strategies for maximizing and growing yourself, not only on the field, but off. At S2 Breakthrough, we believe that athletes should lead their own journey and push past any perceived ceilings on their talent. So join us as we explore the world of softball player development and help you bet on yourself. Because when you bet on yourself, you can't lose.
All right, I'm so excited to have one of my favorites on today. We have Coach Ryker from Ole Miss, and earlier we were chatting about what we were going to talk about, and I heard birds chirping in the background, which is quite different than my outside the window, which has snow in the Chicago area. So I'm a little jealous that I have to listen to lovely birds chirping in the background during this, but that's okay. I'll get over it. So maybe just, obviously, it feels like I've known you my whole life, but we've worked together a little bit the past few years, and maybe just tell everyone a little bit about your background, how you ended up at Ole Miss, what you're doing now, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, the weather is quite nice in Mississippi today. I have to say that. A little warmer than where we just came from in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
I originally grew up in Florida, in the Panhandle there, just outside of like Tallahassee, Florida. I grew up, my dad coached softball. That's kind of like how I got into it originally. My sisters played. And then I played a lot of sports growing up, but this kind of was like always around the softball field, like that annoying little brother at the back of the dugout, whipping arm circles all the time and like annoying the girls in the dugout because it's so loud. And I would like try to mock the girls on my sister's team and all that good stuff. That's kind of like how I got into pitching. And then there was a guy who was in my hometown, and he played some men's fast pitch back in the day with Ken Erickson and some of those guys, like back in the 80s. And he started working with me a little bit, and that's like how I got competitively into softball. And then I was on the junior national team for 4 years. So I was on the USA junior national team from 2013, 2017. And when I finished up on the junior national team, I was at LSU. So I went to LSU as a student manager, student assistant there for 4 years. And in my time there, coached some club ball with Georgia Impact, traveled with the Women's USA team, throw MVP, and was still on like the 40-man roster for the USA men's national team. And I finished up with that in 2019. So I finished up at LSU during COVID, which was not fun because it was kind of like everything was over and I didn't know what I was going to do and what my plans were. So I went home during COVID and was just kind of trying to figure out, what was next for me. I knew that I wanted to coach. Coach Betterine at LSU was a huge mentor for me, and she instilled a lot of belief in me of like, you can do this, like you can take the big job, like you're going to get opportunities. And I was just like, you're crazy, kind of how I felt at first. But I got a couple calls during COVID for a couple different jobs actually, and Jamie was one of them, probably around May, because she was at Minnesota, so she left Minnesota like shortly after COVID was over and got hired at Ole Miss. So she called me in May. I interviewed for about a month actually. And I think, looking back, it was like, I was like, God, this is long. Like, this is a lot, but obviously she had to do that as such a young kid. I was 23 at the time. I was fresh out of college. I was definitely somebody was going to have to take a chance on me to know if I could do it. I'd never done it by myself. So we hit it off though. And I interviewed for like a month, and then she called me one day and was like, we want to hire you here. And I was like, whoa, I guess like after a month, I wasn't even still feeling like it was real. So I actually took a couple days. After that, I spoke to a lot of people who are really important to me and who have helped me as mentors in my life, and wound up taking the job. So I took the job in June of 2020. So it was during COVID. So things were a little bit different, especially when we first got here. We were all three new to a program during COVID, which was not easy to kind of get that up and going. But going into my third season here now, and linked up with you guys in my second season. It was I fell down the rabbit hole of Twitter one night. I think that's where most people start is on Twitter, of like Ashley talking and all these videos. And I was like, man, I need to talk to these people. Like I have some questions just about pitching and player development in general. I have some questions and I need to talk to these people. So I remember reaching out to Trish Ford. She was someone who I talked to a little bit during COVID, just about pitching, some conversations, and she threw your guys' name out there. And I remember reaching out to you, it was, I believe, and I was like, hey, I would really like to work with you guys. I have some questions, and you gave me a couple opportunities, and now we're going into our second year working together, third year here at Ole Miss, and it's been great. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch everyone's growth. I think we love to like be rooting for people. Obviously watching college softball is fun. but when you feel like you're kind of rooting for people, and you're obviously one of those that we're always rooting for. So, okay,
Love that.
we were talking a little bit about, obviously you and I could probably do like a day long podcast, but no one wants to listen to us. Maybe talk for 8 hours, but so we were thinking about just generally kind of what we would talk about, and one of the things I think that is always interesting to me about you and people who sort of see pitching as building staffs and sort of your pitchers working off of each other is
100%.
that I think that, 10 years ago, whatever, 15 years ago, the way that softball could build staffs is we have one Monica Abbott, right? We had like the one kid and she had all the tools. We had Jenny Finch. We had these one pitchers that could kind of do everything. And as the game has grown, what I think we're finding is like there's maybe one or two kids still like that, but there's not too many one kids out there. So maybe talk through a little bit as you are over these past few years, you've been trying to build your staff and obviously competing against really high level hitters in the SEC, of what you look for as you're out, in the summer watching travel ball and looking at those pitchers, of how you navigate the types of tools that you'll need to build that staff for your team.
Yeah. Well, I will start by saying I would love a Monica Abbott or Jenny Finch. I would take either one of them. And you're totally right. I mean, those guys, and then they had some other people when they were really successful to even be able to pitch behind them a little bit to back them up just a little bit, and that was enough. But we are seeing less and less of that. I feel like I've heard them called unicorns, like they're just like a rare breed nowadays. But I feel like for me, the whole staff mentality even started when I was at LSU, like seeing it that way. Coach Serena seen it that way. I think I was around one of the best 1-2 punches in the country at one point, and Allie Waljasper and Carly Hoover that were at LSU for those years that we had a lot of success and wound up in the World Series. And at one point, we had Allie Waljasper, Carly Hoover, and some kids behind them who wound up picking up some innings too. So we had even more besides that dynamic duo of those two. So that's where it started a little bit for me. And then I took the job here at Ole Miss, and they had some good pitching in years past. Caitlin Lee, who was a JUCO transfer here, who took the world by storm in 2017, I think. And Brittany Finney, who transferred over from Oklahoma and had a good, successful career here. And then Molly Jacobson, who was here for 2 years as well, who pitched them to a super regional. So it was all transfer pitching. It was all like transfers who came in and JUCO kids who came in. And when I took the job, there was no transfers and there were no JUCO kids. There were two kids who had been here one had been here for 2 years, one had been here for 3, who hadn't pitched much. I think they equaled together like about 60 innings in their career. There was another kid who was a senior who had thrown some, but she had only thrown mostly like midweek games. She hadn't thrown a lot in the SEC. And then there were 2 freshmen. So I knew right away that nobody was going to be able to get it done on their own. And so from day one, I was just like, we got to do this as a staff. Like if we got to go 4 people in a game, if everybody goes one time through the lineup, then like that's what we're doing. So we really started talking about it then. And then I really got into, with you guys and going down that rabbit hole, I really got into ball flight. And I'm like, okay, what exactly do you do? How do you do it? Right. That was my first question. Like, what exactly do you do? Okay. You have sink, you have up, you have horizontal, you have a great change up. Like, is this blending? I started to ask all those questions. And then I started to see, as we paired kids up in games, because that first year we used a lot of kids in game because just nobody could really get it done by themselves that much. And it was like, okay, when this kid's following this kid, we're seeing a lot more swing and miss. Or when this kid's following this kid, we're seeing more pop-ups or ground balls or something. So I just really started to dig into that. And then my next question was like, okay, how are you accomplishing this? Like, why is it obviously for me, I had the lefty Anna Borgen and Ashley like taught me a lot about her, just about like while she just had a rare combo, she was able to create horizontal and sink, and like into righties on her glove side. So it was like very equal. It was like 4-4 and everything spun that way. She called it curve and screw and drop and it all spun that way. And, but she was a master locator and she had a unique spin type with the horizontal and the vertical. And, Ashley taught me a lot about how she was able to accomplish it and, why that was unique, but why it also required, workload management because it was a lot of stress on her lower arm. So I just started to get into all that and understand. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what I need. So when I'm recruiting, this is what I'm looking for. I need to look at kids who can create this ball flight. I need to look for kids who can do this and do this, because it's really rare that you see kids be able to go up and down. You may have a kid that's like, okay, she's got up, right? But then she's got a little bit of horizontal, maybe a change up. And that probably puts you up there, honestly, in college softball. And then you may see a kid that has down with like a change up that matches down. You're like, okay, that's valuable. The kids who really go up and down and have an off speed are rare. So I was like, okay, I got to start recruiting some pieces here. So that's kind of what I took to. And then even actually before taking it to recruiting, I had a kid who she was a freshman at the time, my first year. She threw 8 innings for us. And it was all like bullet. It was this little bullet profile that was like 1 inch of horizontal and 1 inch of vertical. And I'm like, okay, if I was going to pick for her to try and be able to do something, like what does she match up best to? And actually helped me figure that out. She's like, I think you can give her some up. Okay. So we worked on it. And I took away everything. There was no curve, no screw. It was like, we are going straight up rise ball and we're going to get a change up. And however we do that, we're doing it. And she's thrown the most innings for us this year. She's thrown 55 innings. 2 years ago, she threw 8 innings. This year, she's thrown 55 innings. She's thrown up at about 65. Like her development process has been like, wow. So I realized like not only within my own system of kids that I already had who maybe didn't have that when we got here, I could kind of, based off of what they're capable of. You can't take a kid who could only throw sink and make her throw up, obviously, but based off of what their assessment says and what they're close to and capable of, I could build the staff that I needed. And so then as I'm recruiting, right now I have 4 kids that are in the same class. So they're technically juniors this year. They'll be seniors next year. They're all 4 in the same class. They'll walk out of the door at the same time, which is a little bit nerve-wracking as a coach and a pitching coach. But I've started to look, okay, like, so how do who's going to take this kid's place? Who's going to take this kid's innings? Who's going to take this kid's innings? Like, where are we going to fit? And that's just how I started to recruit. I recruit a lot on ball flight. Like, I want to see your ball flight. I try to get a lot of kids to camp. I want to see their ball flight. I want to see what they do. We have Insight now too, which has been a huge contribution to my, like, just my brain and recruiting and just seeing, okay, how kids are accomplishing things. And okay, so then I want to go watch you compete. What do you have when you step on the mound? What's your mound presence like? What kind of teammate are you? Are you a competitor? Like, are you soft or are you hard? Like, can you get out there and compete like a dog with what you got in the days that maybe your ball flight doesn't look amazing? Like, you're going to get out there and compete. Those are like some of the intangible things, obviously, that go into it. But as far as like trying to build it up and get them to play off each other, we talk about that a lot. We talk about who follows who best. Like, we sit down in preseason in the fall in meetings and we go through the fall like that. When we do scrimmages, I'm like, okay, we'll split them up. I had 6 this year. We'll split them up. And I'm like, okay, you and you are on this side today. You're going one time through the lineup. You're following her. When she gets to this hitter, you're this best matchup for this hitter. So you're going in the game when this hitter comes in. And we practice that. And we split them up and we do different things. And we talk about, hey, what would be her job when she follows her? She's like, her job would be to throw a lot of off speed because she's going from, running the ball in horizontally to righties to she's going to run the ball away from horizontally and it's going to be off speed. And we're going to try to get some swings and misses or some late contact there, not good contact. And so we talk about that a lot. And they know, they're very well versed. They know. And then it's execution past that point. What me and you were talking about a little bit before we started recording here and stuff. Do you look like the smart coach or the dumb coach? Because they executed, they didn't. But because of this and where my brain is at now, I've found a new love for recruiting. It's really helped me because sometimes when you go out and you watch 15 games a day and you're like, my eyeballs are bleeding. Like, somebody help me. I don't even know what velo that is. I don't know what spin that is. I don't know. It's like, it's helped me because it's like, I know what I'm going to look for. And I really enjoy the kids who have already seen their ball flight, whether it's from you guys or Nate Walker that I work with that has their ball flight, or they've come to camp, whatever it is, like, that I've already seen it, then I can go watch it in person. And it just really helps. And it makes so much more sense to me. And I'm like almost excited. I'm like, oh, I'm ready to go see her 8-inch drop ball today.
Right.
And see how it plays against some good talent. So it's been really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was a lot in there, I think, for people to kind of take away. I think one is, I really like this concept that basically what I hear is first know if they have something, like, what is it that they have? Right. And there's ways to kind of measure that with ball flight. So I think one of the things that we've heard is, she might not show as great with measurements, but she gets a lot of swings and misses. And I always say, if she gets a lot of swings and misses, she has something. It's just maybe that you're thinking it's like, it's not 68 miles per hour, or it's not something that we've traditionally measured, but there's something that's causing swings and misses. And so that's where ball flight comes into play. And then the second concept where I think that you get on, which I think blends this like data and the art of coaching, which is, okay, yes, you have something. And now what is it like when you're in a game and you're being asked to like use it, right? Which
Yeah.
is another sort of measurement, which I think is both of those are equally important to recruiting. So I love that concept. I also heard in there, which I think is just like, I don't know, I could like scream it from the rooftops 1,000 times, is that we can develop kids in college, that we don't run out of time. Yeah. So it's amazing. I think when, last year, Ashley and Laura went down there for assessments, and this year when they went back, one of the things they said to like our full staff was like, I'm just so proud of Ryker. I'm so proud of the Ole Miss staff, like how much you guys grew in a year. And so I think like that building things can also happen. And so I think that both of those sides of it is so important. I think we get to the competitor side. I think one question I have on that, which I think is, I've heard a lot, as we've sort of grown into this space where we work with a lot of pitching coaches and coaches in general who use data insight, matchups, different ways to like approach winning, that part of that also like the execution and the competitiveness, like there's a lot to that. So if you say to a kid who was a starter, was the main pitcher for her travel ball pitcher, was a starter through complete games, that was her role, like she was, that workhorse, and all of a sudden you're like, your best matchup right now is to come in at the end of the game, you're going to close, right?
Yeah.
And like, but that's a really different mental, asking them to do something really different. So
Sure.
what has that like process been like? What have you seen of trying to blend that? Okay, this is a good matchup, but this is a new role for this kid. Like, how are we gonna, navigate that?
Yeah. I can't say yet that I feel like I've had the kid who came in the door with all the stuff. McKenna Claythormis is a
Yeah.
transfer from Oregon for us. So she's in the fourth year of her college career. So she came in with some stuff, obviously being in college. And she was a very main pitcher for them at Oregon last year. And she's, probably still figuring out like the staff dynamic of what we have here as she's new, and how she fits into that, but she's done a really good job buying into it and being a piece of it and being a really great teammate. One of our freshmen, Grace Sparks, threw her first time in the SEC. She threw a one shutout inning on Friday night against Tennessee, and she came off the field and she's teasing, she's so happy. And McKenna grabs her and gives her high five and was like, great job. So she's buying into that. But I've had more of I've been really successful in high school, but really didn't have much when they got here. And two of them that come to mind is like Ansley Furbush, who was a high school state champion, just stud, like dominated high school in Florida, but got here with bullet spin, really like hard bullet spin. And I'm like, okay, you have velo, but this ball flight is not going to take you very far. I mean, and her freshman year, man, I was like that crazy coach. Like, we have to make her better to practice every day, and we're going to throw 200 pitches a day. And I mean, they would pitch before our midweek games. Like we had midweek games and on Wednesdays, and like they were not going to pitch in the game. So her and our other freshman, Landon Bruce, would like pitch before the midweek. They throw a bullpen before the midweek. And like just so bought into like trying to develop themselves. And so you have this kid who's like, I'm a stud, and then she gets here and maybe doesn't have all the stuff, but now look at her. 2 years later,
Mm-hmm.
she's thrown the most innings on our team. She has the most wins. Like she's been huge for us. She's a two-way player too. She hits and pitches. And then I think about something like Caitlin Riley, like kind of a missed kid a little bit on the recruiting scene. A big physical kid, threw hard, like 64. 65, but didn't really know as much about like spinning the ball and break. Like it was a lot of bullets. She thought she threw curve and rise. She didn't think she threw drop when she got here. Now drops one of her best pitches, but she's just a dog. Like right here, you can't mess with her. Like she's been out for a month. So she got hurt in the very first game of the year, and she's been out for a month. and she just came back on the Sunday night game against Tennessee. It's the first time she's pitched in a month that she gave up 2 hits. And she just like, did she have her absolute best stuff? No, I don't think she broke 66 one time. She's a 68 to 70 mile an hour kid, and she did not have her best stuff, but she just competes. And now she's getting stuff. So you get that kid who's a competitor, like through and through, and then you actually develop her physical skill set of like giving her some stuff, and you're like, man, that could be special. And so, that's what I'm looking for in recruiting too. It's like those kids. So you have some kids who have ball flight, and I'm seeing this now. I used that first year, like right when I got down the rabbit hole with you guys, I was like, I'm going after ball flight. If you could throw an 8-inch drop ball, you can win in the SEC. If you have 5 inches of up, you can win. And then I'm like going to watch, and I'm like, where's that kid that showed up at camp with 5 inches of up? Like I'm not seeing her today in the game. And so it's like, it's why too in softball we're a little behind on the in-game data, and we got to get there. We have some people coming on the scene with Yacker Tech and people like that, but we got to get there. And Rapsodo is coming out with their unit too. We got to get there with the in-game data unit, because right now it's the biggest thing I see. What my kids can do in the bullpen in a very controlled setting, they go out in live, and that data doesn't always look the same. And so it's like, you're capable of it. How do we transfer it from the bullpen to the mound? And some of that for me is that mentality. It's that belief in myself of like, I'm trusting my training. I know what I need to do. I've done it enough. I'm capable. I'm like knowing what you're trying to do and what you believe in out there. I've seen that. I've seen kids be able to do it in a controlled setting and not be able to do it when you step on the mound. And I've also seen kids who could come out of the bullpen and step on the mound, and because they're nervous, afraid, excited, anything, you name it, emotion, like not be able to have the emotional control to still compete or compete without their best stuff. And so that's something that I watch. Like, and now that I see, pitching and data in a different way, when I'm seeing kids come to camp or I'm seeing kids' numbers and I go watch them, like, I want to see you. I want to see you have a bad outing. Who are you when things go wrong, And who are you when that ball flight ain't ball fighting too much? Who are you going to be? And
Right.
I think those are things that are really important, because a college softball season is long, and you're going to have some outings where you're going to go out and you're supposed to be the matchup, and the matchup didn't match today, and we've got to figure something else out. And whether that's you or you passing the ball off and just responding as a good teammate, those are things that are definitely a part of it, that I think I've like evolved through that. At first it was like I was like a lost little kid, and then it was like, okay, it's all about ball flight. Like, if you can spin the ball, you can win. And it's like, okay, yes. Now the next piece of that is like, okay, can you spin the ball and then match that up with some belief and a mentality yourself? And I think those are the kids that you see be most successful. Like we just talked about, before they started recording, Ashley Rogers. I think Ashley Rogers, a healthy Ashley Rogers, is one of the best pitchers in the country. I'd put her up against anybody. Yeah. And she don't care. When she's out there on that mound, you best believe it, she's like locked in, bullseye, ready to kill. And you feel it. You feel that. But if she had that same ball flight and she just moseyed around the mound, I don't know if she'd be as good as she is.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think this is something really interesting too about, it's just like blending of the concepts, which I find so interesting. It's something that, like, I also coach a travel ball team, and I have the benefit of knowing all of their data. So I come into it a little different, which is like, these are the pitches that we're throwing. Here's how we're maximizing this pitch off of this pitch, that type of thing. But I always say to them is that it doesn't mean like if you throw a rise that suddenly in a game you throw sink, but you might throw a +5 rise, and that day you throw a +2 rise, and that's a lot different, right? Like, that's a lot different. That concept is, and that pitch is different. And so I always say to the athletes in the game is the way that you compete is, first of all, identify that, right? Like I say to the kids, like, if all of a sudden your rise that people don't touch and they swing and miss, people are fouling it off at first, like, you need to have an instant conversation of either, I need to go over to the bullpen and try to see if I can tap into something different, or like, we got to go to plan B. Like, what's plan B? My rise needs to be in a different location. I got to work on this pitch. And so I think it's what I've seen in, unfortunately in a lot of travel ball, it's kids don't even know that. And so it is hard to, like, I think the first step is like being able to know yourself and how to use those tools, and that your 100%. Coach also knows that and helps you work through that. And then I think, like, the more you know those things, which is where I think you're like, it's like ball flight plus works together. It's not either or. It's not like, yes, but I'm such a competitor. You're like, yes, but you're a competitor who throws 55 bullet. Like that's not doing it in the
Yeah.
SEC, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. So it's like, yes, but you have these tools, but those tools fluctuate as they do with everyone. We have a 3-game series. We have a doubleheader against this school. We have all of these things. And obviously in travel ball, you have 7 games this weekend or whatever.
Right.
Like those things fluctuate. So what do you do? What do you tap into when it's fluctuating? And I think that's what competitiveness is. And that is maturity and understanding yourself and like that type of thing, which is, it's a journey. It's definitely a journey, but I think it's really
Right.
special when kids can tap into it.
And it's what I hear when I hear you guys say bet on me all the time. Like if I had to say
Yeah.
put that what that meant to me a little bit, it's like, hey, like betting on me doesn't mean that my feelings are protected all the time. It doesn't mean that
Right.
like I'm always gonna feel good and my coach is gonna tell me you're good enough, all this stuff. It's like you gotta be able, like sometimes as young athletes, young female athletes, you gotta be able to like, hey, this is where you are, but I'm gonna help you get to the other side of this. Like I've had that conversation with multiple of our younger athletes for sure. Because like I think about Morgan, if I would have had her for 4 years, we probably would have added a little bit of variability there. It's like what you're talking about. Like the same thing in the SEC. Like everybody's video is out there, bro. And like at this point,
Right,
everybody's
yeah.
video, and it's about to be everybody's video attached to ball fight. So good luck. Like if you're
Right.
one dimensional, good luck. But you add some variability, you're able to do some different things. Like you said, second time around, second time to the lineup, second game in a 3-game series, whatever. But I think for some of the young kids, where they get their feelings hurt a little bit is it's like, hey, this is actually where you are. I think you guys do a really good job of this. Like you when you bring kids in for an assessment, it's not personal. It's just honest. It's like, hey, this is your assessment. This is what your movement profile says. This is what your ball flight is. This is all of this. Okay, now let us help you. Right? It's not judgment, and it's not anything. But sometimes people are like, well, they told me that my Rod ball is not good. Well, it's not. Sally, it's just not.
Right.
But we can help you. And like I
Right.
think that's the conversation I've had with some of my young athletes too. It's like it's not good enough yet, but keep betting on yourself. Like keep betting on you that you, with the right resources and the right training, can get it done and can accomplish that. And I think sometimes we have to buy in a little bit better to that, because I get young kids in and they're like, I throw curve, screw, drop, curve, rise, and change up and flip, change up. I'm like, okay. Well, we're going to focus on throwing that drop ball and that change up. I have a freshman this year.
Right.
It's like, that's what it was. It's like, we're going to focus on throwing that drop ball and that change up. But for a long time, when she failed, when she had failure, not when she succeeded, obviously, but when she had failure, she was like, well, if I could just throw my rise ball in there. I'm like, nope, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Like you have to, when you can master these 2 pitches, then we can start talking about some variability. And it was like being able to fail, knowing that you're on a journey, knowing that it's a process. Right. and player development is a process. And I think, we're starting to create that culture here a little bit. Like as soon as she did that, I was in the fall and I told our kids who one's a junior, one's a sophomore now, I'm like, talk to her. You've been there when I stuck you out there and said, you get 2 pitches and these are the 2 pitches that you get to throw, and you have to master these. Like you've been there and now you have 3 or now you have 4 and, help her through this. And so I think we're creating that culture a little bit here at Ole Miss and as a pitching staff, and I'm really excited about that. But I just think the really great ones that we see in our game have the physical with the mental, right? Like they have that mentality of how to compete, and they have the physical stuff, and that's no secret. And I think there's some kids who have been successful in our game with less physical and more mental. And there have been some kids that have been successful in our game with more physical and less mental. Like there's a balance and a trade-off there. Obviously, if you have both, then you're going to be a stud. But have had some kids over the years that maybe didn't have the super duper competitive mentality, but they had the stuff, and that could do something for us as a piece of our staff. And then I had some kids who didn't have as much physical stuff, but they were dogs, and they could do something for our staff too. But I think the other thing I think that's really important when you talk about like travel ball culture a little bit, in baseball, what you see sometimes is you have all these different matchups, and you have the opener and the closer and the 2 bulk people and how you use people. And when those guys are getting hit a little bit, right, what happens? They come and get them, right? It's like next man up. You're getting shelled a little bit. We're coming to get you. It's like next man up. And it's not, for some of the guys that have a little bit of that ego, that high money ego, it's tough for them. But the other guys, it's not as personal. And I think sometimes in our game right now, it's like coming to be gotten and relieved is like a negative. It's
Mhm.
hard for kids. You see, I go to travel ball tournaments and I see kids being ticked off when they're getting pulled off the mound, and the parents and everybody being like, "Let them compete, let them work through it." I'm like, it's not as much about that. I get that side of it, like competing and working through it. There's a time and a place when you're at PGF, right, and you're trying to win. Like, you're not letting kids like work through it and compete. Like, you're like, hey, today you're, like you said, maybe throwing that 5-inch rosin ball that you normally have is 2 inches. That's okay. I'm not like pissed off at you about it, right? We can go to the bullpen and try to work it out, or try to mix something up. And if that doesn't work, it's just like next man up. It's a part of having a staff. Like, you're not going to have your best stuff every day, and
Right.
understanding that and how that plays as a staff, I think, is so important, because I think sometimes it's like we talk a lot about how we pass the ball off. Like, when we come to replace a pitcher or get a pitcher, it's like you're going to pass the ball off to your teammate, and you're going to give them some words of encouragement, tell them something about the zone, tell them something about the hitter they're about to face, something. You got to pass something along and be positive about it, because I think too many times it's viewed as like a negative, and the person coming off the mound is like angry that they're coming to get got.
Yeah. I think it just kind of what you said, it's like reframing that concept. So I think like one of the things I would do in the fall with our team is, we play a lot of showcases. So we could kind of lay out our rotation a little bit, and it would say like, okay, whatever. Sally is the starting pitcher. She's going to be capped at this many pitches, or she's going to come out if she starts getting hit. Like, if we're getting close to that. And so then the next person up is this person. We might even get to this person depending on how fast we're changing. Like, we talk about that openly. It's just like, there's no point in being out there roasting. That's different than competing, like if you're competing through it, I'm not going to pull you, which is a different concept. And so I think understanding that we carry a Rapsodo in travel ball, which is like quite a setup for me, but that's,
I love that.
It is. So we set it up for the bullpen, and our kids it's just another way too, I think, of changing the framework, which is if we're on day 2 and that kid's velo's down, she sees it. And we just say like, okay, it looks like you're a little tired. We're not recovering the way that we thought, which is like totally fine, but let's change our game plan a little bit with what that looks like with the velo down. Let's know that maybe most likely you're not throwing this full game because your body's already tired. Like, and then it's less personal, like you said, which is like, this is not a personal attack on you. It's, if anything, it's empowering. We're trying to put you in environments that are like the most likely for your success. So I think you're right. It's kind of refraining that and this like old school mindset of like, I'm just going to leave her out there. It's just like,
tough. Wow. Yeah. Like, I'm going to be tough.
Right. Yeah.
Come on.
It's just
it's
like,
why there's six or seven of them. It's why there's 6 or 7 of them, and there's a pitching staff. Like, we got you.
Right. Yeah, totally. All right. Well, we could talk forever, so I'm going to end it there. I'm going to actually end with one question, because I've been asking all the college coaches this question to finish, and then some even of the other coaches. So if you could, and this is good because you're the first pitching specific person I've asked this to. So maybe keep it pitching specific or not. I don't know. It's up to you.
Okay.
If you could suggest a question or two for high school athletes to ask of the schools that they are considering for college, that you think would give them like good insight into that program, or the types of things that they should ask, what would you suggest? You can keep it pitching or not if you think you should.
High school athletes that are gonna like.
Yeah, so someone's on a visit.
Okay.
And they get an opportunity to ask the coaching staff, something about their program, something about the school. What are the types of things you think that they should try to investigate?
There's 2 things that I think are really important when it comes to making a decision, and there's a lot of things that go under that umbrella, but it's player development and player relationships. Those are 2 things that I think if you're going to be happy at a school as an athlete, you want to get developed and you want to have a good relationship. So I would say the 2 things that I would want to ask, like, I'll put myself in their shoes a little bit. Like, if I was going to a place, I would say, can you tell me what your player development system looks like? And so if we're talking pitching specific, like, how do you, like, if you get a freshman in, right, what are you doing? Like, are you from day one, are you making me like change my whole windup and throw the pitches in the style that you think I should throw them in? or are you going to work with me and what I do and give me actual real data, measurable things, feedback that I should do to help me? I guess, like, what does your player development system look like? And then I would ask out and I would ask them about like things they do from a player relationship standpoint. Like, what are some things you do as, like, team bonding? Is your office always open? But you know who I would ask if you really want to know? Ask the athletes. Ask the
Yeah.
athletes. Like, when you go as an athlete, you should be asking the other athletes that are in the program what it looks like to be a player, what it looks like to be a person in that program. Not like, oh, you guys have great practice. They teach you all these great tactics. Like, what does it look like if I'm struggling? Like, if I'm having a really bad day, like, have you ever been in your coach's office when you had a bad day? Have they ever talked to you about anything other than softball? Like, when your boyfriend broke up with you, were you able to, like, have a conversation about, like, where you were at mentally? Was that something that happened? Those are things I would be asking, because I just think those are two. If you're going to be really happy at a place, you have to be able to have relationships with your coaches, and coaches have relationship with your players, and you have to have a player development system where it doesn't mean you're always successful, but it means that your kids are seeing the data and the numbers and the
Right.
success of getting better year by year.
Yeah, for sure. Good ones. All right. Well, thank you so
probably
much
a lot
for coming
there, but
on. Yes. No, it's really good. I appreciate you coming on. Lots of stuff for people to digest in this, which I think is awesome. And I'm sure that we will talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Obviously, Ryker loves us too, always, and I'm super appreciative of you guys.
Well, S2 Nation, thanks for joining another episode of the Bet On Me podcast. Go out today, bet on yourself, and remember, when you bet on yourself, you can't lose.